Alright, so I've gone over my top 10 favorite movies of 2017, and at the end of that video I promised that I was going to do a video on my 10 least favorite movies, and that's this video right here. A couple things to keep in mind. Again, I haven't seen every movie, but also, so I don't go out of my way to watch bad movies like I would go out of my way to watch a movie that I heard was really good, so I didn't see Bye Bye Man or Flatliners or anything like that. But I did end up seeing some movies that, for whatever reason, they intrigued me, and they caught my attention, and they turned out to be pieces of shit. And this is a list of 10 of those movies that really disappointed me, or they were just bad, or, you know, let's just get right into it. This intro's done. Number 10 is Downsizing. Now, the problem with this movie is that it's boring as all hell, despite a completely fascinating concept. The execution of that concept is actually kind of cool. The way that they delve into shrinking down and the smaller scale cities, I thought that was interesting, but the problem is the characters in this movie are so boring, they're so flat, especially Matt Damon's character, where Matt Damon didn't really do anything to bring anything special to him, and it's not necessarily his fault because the writing for that character was bad anyway, but this movie really did disappoint. It's a snooze fest, and it's not the biggest snooze fest on this list, but it sure is not worth checking out. On number 9 is The Dark Tower. This movie is based off of books that I have not read. I didn't know anything going into it, but this movie did not do anything well in its explanation of the events that were going on, because I was confused the whole time, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and the more I thought about it after I walked out of the theater, the less and less I liked it. And so this is one of those movies that does punish you a little bit for thinking about it, which is a shame. It looked like it could have been cool, and there's one or two moments in here that are alright, but overall, this movie, it's just kind of boring and confusing, and I kind of wish I didn't see it, but it's also harmless at the same time. That's why it's not further up on the list. Just one of those movies like, I saw it, whatever. It's an hour 45, I won't get back. Number 8 on the list is The Fate of the Furious. I've seen a couple other movies in this franchise, and I've seen the first one, I've seen parts of number 5, and I have seen the 7th one, and everything else I've seen, I thought it was fun. It's nothing groundbreaking, it's just sort of basic action movie stuff, but this one just bored the living hell out of me, because there's this story about how his kid gets kidnapped, and I couldn't care less about anything that was going on. The action was sort of dull, and it was over-edited, so it was very hard to tell what was going on. None of the characters were really that fun in this movie. They didn't interact well like they have in the other movies. The Rock and Jason Statham are easily the best part of this movie, but they could not save this movie, because even when they were on screen, just the stuff that was coming out of their mouths didn't sound natural. The dialogue in this movie's terrible. And I get they're supposed to be fun movies, and I've liked some of the other ones. This one just didn't do it for me enough to where it made it on this list. So it's one of the highest grossing movies of the year, which is awesome. I love it when bad movies make money. Number 7, Kong Skull Island. Talk about another snooze fest. And the reason that this one's a snooze fest is because none of the characters mean shit in this movie. Because they're all flat, cookie-cutter characters. You don't care about anything that's going on with them, therefore you don't care about anything in the movie. And it's just boring. It was to the point where when the finale came and it's supposed to be this really cool King Kong fights the monster, which looked stupid, by the way. The monster, not King Kong. Even though I wasn't a particularly big fan of the design of King Kong. Anyway, whatever. When it got to the end, I was so not invested that I didn't care what was happening. I was just watching like, alright, is it going to be over? I just want this movie to end. Oh, he's punching something in the face. Like, I just couldn't care. I didn't have any fun with this movie, which is what these kinds of movies should be for, and this movie fell flat on its face. Really just wasn't good. I don't know. So now with number 6, we start getting into the legitimately bad movies, I think. The other 4 movies that I mentioned, there's parts to enjoy with them, even though I personally didn't like them very much. It's sort of a personal preference thing, I think, and I understand if you like those movies, go for it. I don't care. You like what you like. If that makes you happy, fantastic. But these are the movies where if you like them, then I start looking at you a little funny. And that starts off with number 6, and that's The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Similar to The Dark Tower, I walked out of this movie and I thought it was just okay, but then the more I thought about it, the worse and worse it got, because I thought about all the things dissimilar to The Dark Tower, where I thought it got more and more confusing as I thought about it. This movie, The Mummy, got more and more difficult to think about because of how bad they messed this up. Because they didn't really focus on making a movie at all. They were making a product to sell. It's like, hey, we're selling your dark universe. We're not selling you a movie. We're not even going to make a movie. We're just going to make an advertisement for these other movies that are coming out later in the future. And it was just it came across as sort of disgusting, the way that they just sort of shamelessly did it. And the movie itself is also uninteresting. None of the characters matter. The action is dull. This is a bad movie. Don't see it. And if they make more of these movies, I'm probably not gonna see them because of how awful this one was. There's stupid jump scares. There's stupid everything in this movie. I don't know. I don't understand how you can mess this one up as bad as it was messed up. Number 5 on this list is Justice League. Justice League is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life, and it's only number 5 on this list. It really disappointed the absolute hell out of me. There's potential with these actors and with these characters. I understand there was production problem. I even did a whole review on this movie, but this movie, I could not care less. Had it not been for Suicide Squad, this would easily be my least favorite movie that DC has ever made, because it's that bad to me. Just everything about this movie doesn't work. The actors have no chemistry with one another. I could not get into anything happening in this movie. And if you like it, I mean, good for you, but I just don't understand how this movie can bring enjoyment to someone. There's nothing going for this movie. The colors are bland. The action is bland. The characters, they don't do anything with them. The villain is terrible. Everything in this movie is just awful, and I don't understand, again, how can you make a movie like this so bad? There's so much potential. It's like 10 different people had a different idea on what to do with this movie, and so they just blended it all together into this pile of crap that we ended up getting. Such a shame. Number 4 is Suburbicon. This is a movie that I thought had potential, but ended up just falling completely flat on its face. It's boring, it's uninteresting, it's really bizarre, but not in a clever or charming kind of way. It's just sort of off-putting, the things that happen in this movie. It was just a really weird movie. It caught me off guard, some of the stuff that happened, but again, not in a good way. Like, there's some movies that I liked this year where stuff caught me off guard, like Mother. A lot of stuff caught me off guard in that, but in this movie, it was just very bizarre the way that the events took place. Nothing really seemed to make sense, nothing really seemed to contribute to anything, and it ended up just making a really bizarrely bad movie. It's just a really weird how bad this movie ended up being. It's still a really bad movie, but it's just, it's very bizarre. Number 3. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. Oh my god, this is the most bored I was in a movie all year. This movie was way too long. Nothing good happened. Oh, I can't tell you what happened in this movie because I forgot basically everything. The new characters they introduced, who cares? I don't know anything about them. They weren't interesting. The actors didn't do much interesting with them. Jack Sparrow is basically a dead character now. They don't know what they're doing with him. And, yeah, this movie is, it's boring. That's the worst part. Everything about it is dull and bland. There's nothing interesting about it. Absolutely nothing going for it. And there's still 2 more movies to go. And I really did not like Pirates, but, oh, might as well just get this list over with. The more I think about it, the more I just want to get this over with. Number 2 is Daddy's Home 2. One of the worst sequels I've ever seen to one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. The first Daddy's Home is terrible. Every joke is lazy. They don't care what they're doing with that first movie. And it's even worse with this movie. And it's even worse because they kind of got me a little bit with the trailer. Because I thought, oh, that's the clever enough, that could be a good enough idea. Where you bring in their dads and it's, Mel Gibson and John Lithgow. but they just throw every bit of potential out the window and go with the easiest jokes possible with the worst comedic timing. There's no chemistry with these characters. It's just awful. I only laughed once in this movie, and even that, it was just a little bit of a chuckle. It's awful. Don't see this movie ever. Don't see the first one ever. I really hope they stop making these movies because it doesn't make me want to see Will Ferrell or Mark Wahlberg in anything ever again. It's ridiculous. Like, it's making me dislike these actors for something that isn't even their fault. Oh, this movie's, it's terrible. But there's one movie that makes me so angry inside, but I'm just so tired of all these movies that I've been talking about that I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue with how I feel about Birth of the Dragon, which is my least favorite movie of 2017. It's a bizarre pick, I understand that. If you haven't seen this movie, I don't think a lot of people saw it. So if you haven't seen it, basically what it is it's supposed to be a Bruce Lee story about before he became like the famous Bruce Lee, and he's fighting a guy named Wong Jack Man. I knew nothing about this story going into it. I'm like, it could be kind of interesting. But oh my god, every single bad thing they could do in a movie, they did in this movie. The only good thing about this is that some people cared. It looked like the stunt coordinators kind of cared what was going on. Everybody else did not give a shit because this movie is atrocious. The writing is terrible. They introduced this character, his name is Steve. He's just this guy who inserts himself into this story, and all of a sudden he becomes the protagonist. Everything revolves around him, and it's just terrible. It's such an atrocity, this stupid movie, and everything about this does not work. The characters are terrible. The writing is terrible, especially this fucking Steve guy. He's just awful. I don't understand how you can approve putting this in a movie because you have this really interesting story about a very famous person and you make that the subplot to this really terrible romance between Steve and some girl that he just met that doesn't even speak English, and he's like, oh, I love her, you gotta fight, Bruce. It's terrible. This movie is just terrible. Man, I don't even want to get into it. I've written stuff here, there's a link, but it's awful. It really is. These are just the movies that I just so happened to see too. Thank God I didn't see something like Flatliners. Otherwise, this video would be 10 times as long. But those are my worst movies of 2017. I understand that it might be a bizarre pick, or a bizarre list for some people. It's just my list. These are the movies that I thought were the worst this year. Let me know what movies you thought were the worst this year, and I look forward to leaving these pieces of crap behind and moving on to the next year, which hopefully has a lot better movies to offer. But I know that I'm going to be making one of these lists again next year anyway, so I'm curious to see what those movies are going to be as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I got new reviews coming out very soon for you. I'll see you next time.